everybody that came out that was invited to support my recovery trip. I hope you enjoyed my testimony. Hello, my name is John and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I suffer from mental health and sexual integrity.
Hi, John.
Hi everyone, I just want to start off tonight by saying a prayer. Oh God, please use me tonight in a mighty way to be a witness for you and to let my story impact people's lives around me in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 I was born in Kingman, Arizona in 1979. I had a mother, a father, two sisters, and a brother named Tom. When I was about 6 months to a year old, I was not exactly sure, but I was somehow found over on my most tried. I almost did not make it. They had to have me from still to stern.
Start over.
So hard to miss it. Sorry about that, John.
I almost didn't make it. They had to cut me open from stem to stern and put my organs back where they belong. From that beginning family, I only have my older brother Tommy, whom I now live with. The rest are completely gone from my life. From my memory, my brother and I were abused, and when Tommy was 5 and I was 2, we were dropped off at the Salvation Army. I have never heard from my birth family again. I can't remember how we got to Texas, but my brother and I were in a foster home until we were adopted by this woman near Fort Worth. This is the woman I would call Mom until her passing when I was 33. I can remember my first Christmas with my mom and Tommy in a little house on a quiet street. There were presents. Mom even made a birthday cake for Jesus. I was happy. Between adoption and her passing, however, a great deal happened. For the first couple of years, I recollected it was okay. Then there were events of abuse where, from the bruises and marks were seen by daycare. We were removed from the home to an orphanage. We still had weekend visits. Eventually, my brother was adopted by another family. I knew where he was and occasionally saw him, but he was pretty much gone from my everyday life. I continued with weekend visits with my mom. One of those weekends I went to a friend's house where he showed me his dad's magazines. That was the first introduction to pornography. Throughout my childhood, I suffered from ADHD and was hyper all the time. While I was still in the orphanage, I was sent to Dallas Medical Center Children's Psych Unit, where I went through therapy and was put on medication. I was there about a year and then sent to the state hospital. I remember on occasion when they must have thought me out of control, they would sedate me and put me in a quiet room. This was a 10 by 10 brick room with a tile floor and no furniture. I lived in the state hospital for a couple of years and acted out a lot. The whole time I just wanted to be part of a family. When I was about 10 years old, I was sent to a therapeutic foster family in Colorado to help me cope with my abandonment issues. I liked them, and we went on hikes and other family outings. It was good to be part of a family again. I was with them 3 or 4 years, then removed to a boys' home, to a boys' ranch. At the boys' ranch, I met a staff member named Jake. He was a Christian and would often witness to us boys. I was saved and baptized in the Colorado River. 3 or 4 years later, I moved back to Texas to another group home. After a few years, I was sent to the Nelson Center, a therapeutic group home for mental health. I was about 16 at this point and ran away from there and was put into an emergency youth shelter. Ran away again and then was emancipated at 17. I was then totally on my own. My caseworker dropped me off at the homeless shelter in Fort Worth. From that point on, I hitchhiked, trained, hopped all over the country for about 10 years. While in California, I started doing drugs, specifically weed, acid, mushrooms, and meth. I met a traveling buddy who was straight edge, alcohol and drug free, and we went across the country hopping trains. During that time, I was mostly drug free. We were in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, hopping a freight, but it was speeding up really fast and hard to catch on the fly. I jumped on the grinder ladder, putting my knees where my feet were supposed to go, and slipped off. I happened to catch the first rung of the ladder and was being dragged, so I decided to roll away from the train as hard as I could. I said, God, if you're up there, I'm completely out of control. Please help me. I rolled sideways on my ankle, and my ankle got run over by the train. I pulled my foot off the track and tried to line it up with the rest of my leg. I took the bandana off my neck and tied it above my knee. The train yard manager saw the whole thing and the first to get to me. An ambulance drove me to a helicopter and they flew me to the hospital straight into surgery. I woke up in ICU with metal rods through my foot. From that day forward, I knew Jesus Christ was real and He had to save my life. I had a deeper faith than ever before. I was in the hospital a month and a half going through many surgeries. Finally, they asked me if I wanted to continue surgeries for the next several years with a not so good prognosis or have my leg amputated and be walking within a year. I chose to amputate. I saw this as God allowing me to lose my leg because of not bearing fruit and to keep me from running from Him. John 15:2, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, He prunes, that it may bear more fruit. For me, that was literal. I felt like I was my own worst enemy. I had been running from God for years. One of my favorite verses is 2 Corinthians 12:9, and He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. It was all about God. I wanted so much to put Him first, but it was still a struggle. My previous caseworker had me flown back to Texas, where I lived in a homeless shelter for those with mental illness. It was there in therapy that I was diagnosed with bipolar anxiety and depression. I still struggled with drugs and had a hard time conforming to the rules and restrictions, so eventually ended up back out on the streets. While on crutches, I began traveling again, this time hitchhiking. I was in New Orleans with the gutter punks. To New Jersey, I was in New Orleans with gutter punks. To New Jersey in a punk rock house where I was still using drugs and alcohol. I got a word that my prosthesis was ready, and if I didn't come get it, I would lose it. My friend sent me a bus ticket, and I found myself back in Texas. After I got my prosthetic, I was back on the road again, continuing the struggle. I missed the West Coast, so I went back to San Francisco. I felt lost and hopeless, which led me to using heroin. I panhandled for dope and was homeless. Eventually ended up in Oregon, where I met a young lady that invited me to home church. I stayed at the home church for 3 or 4 months detoxing from heroin. I got a job stocking shelves. I was still in Oregon, and about 5 years after not seeing or hearing from my mom in Texas, I sent an email apologizing for my behavior while living with her. She forgave me and came to Oregon to visit. We hung out and did touristy things like the Botanic Gardens and Cannon Beach. We had an awesome time, and then she returned home to Texas. I got homesick and went back to Texas to be closer to my mom. I lived with my friend. When I got there, my friend was doing drugs and I was not. After talking to my mom about that, she got me an apartment and a car. I attended church with Mom and found out that they had a group called CASA, Christians Against Substance Abuse. I went to CASA for a couple of months and saw a flyer for Celebrate Recovery. Then I began going to CR regularly. I got a job and worked for about 8 months. I longed for the road and drove my car to Austin, about 3 hours away, and again hung out with the street people. While I was there, I relapsed and was drinking and smoking weed again. I did this for a couple of weeks and then went back to my apartment. My mom had been there, cleaned it up, and rescued my hamster. When I went to see her, I found out how worried she was, and I ended up staying there for 2.5 years. I tried to appease my mom, but I was getting high and drinking with friends while I worked off and on through the temp agency. I stopped going to Celebrate Recovery during this time, and the struggle was real. Now getting high was different because since I had been saved, I would really get convicted and feel bad about what I was doing. It was a battle. My mom stopped enabling me and no longer paid for my apartment. I then lived in the garage and an old childhood friend, Matt, and his girlfriend Stephanie, and I was still getting high doing coke, heroin, and meth. I absolutely could not hang with my friends and stay sober. One day my friends were fighting and left their young child alone in the house. I realized that and stayed, but the police were called and they came and took me to jail for some past warrants. When I got out of jail, I was living in a van that I had been given to me. My life was really messed up. I would drive my friend's girlfriend, Stephanie, to escort appointments, and in return, she put gas in my car and kept me high. After doing this for several months, Stephanie went to jail, then to live-in treatment center. Matt moved away, and I sold my van and was living in the Mission homeless shelter. I was still smoking weed, but see my mom on the weekends and go with her to church on Sunday, then back to the shelter. I did this a couple months, then Matt asked me to move where he was a couple hours away. I lived with Matt for about 6 months, then back to the town my mom was. I lived with my friend from the homeless shelter. It was then I began talking to my brother Tommy again. He was living in Kansas City during the years I had not seen him. He got married and had children. He came to visit me for a week. It was just me and him. Nothing could be better. I was visiting my mom when I got a phone call from my brother saying, if you wanted to get your life back on track, there was a plane ticket waiting at Love Field. I went. My brother and his wife Katie had a nice house just up the street from the library in Kansas City. I belonged to a family again. I felt loved. My SSI case for organic brain deficiency syndrome was approved, and I was finally getting stable and felt revitalized. I watched their 2 infants during the day while they worked and went to school. A few nights a week, I would go to a trendy coffee shop and hang out with hippie kids. I found myself smoking weed again, but was done with the hard stuff. Things were good for about 3 months, but when my brother and his wife fought, I believed it was because of me and I moved out. I moved into a commune-type community, and the leader became the payee of my SSI checks. I later found out that he was paying his child support with my disability check. I lived there for about 6 months and then went back to my brother's family. In 2009, we all moved to O'Fallon. They lived in an apartment and I got a room nearby in a nice subdivision. A year later, we all rented a house. Katie, Tommy, and I started going to CR at Harvester Church in the Nazarene. At first, for me, it was just a social thing, where I would meet folks and we would go smoke weed and drink alcohol afterwards. I was still resistant to change. We went there for 3 or 4 years until the CR shut down. During this time, my mom asked if the family all wanted to come to Texas for a visit. Mom and Tommy worked out their differences and reunited. The visit went well and the whole extended family was there, all together again. It was a good time. Later, Mom came out to see us in Missouri. She told us that she had cancer and was going through chemo. We were able to visit her a few times before she passed away and went to heaven. Eventually, Katie and Tommy bought a house they are in now, and I lived with a friend close by during that time. I wanted to go back to Celebrate Recovery and started going to First Assembly CR where I met Chad Joyce. He made sure I never missed a meeting. I even joined a step study and went through The Journey Begins. Yes. It was incredible and came with freedom and healing. I went until they stopped CR about a year later. Chad contacted me and they were beginning CR at First Assembly again and asked me to come. I did, and before you knew it, I was in another step study working on my mental health and pornography. I had 34 weeks freedom from pornography. It was awesome, and I felt so much freedom and healing. I relapsed and felt ashamed and distant from God. I spoke to my sponsor and started all over again, still going to CR to this day, and now I'm a small group leader and volunteer. And guess what? I joined another step study and got a new sponsor. Going through the 12 steps again. God is good and I love my forever family. I have almost 15 years clean of heroin and a few months clean of pornography.
Amen.
I'm not perfect, but I'm trying my best.
Amen.
Thank you for letting me share.